the origin story for the book really came from my friend Yasmin Hassan, and she called me when I was living in Abu Dhabi because there were 5 women who had collectively murdered their trafficker.
You're listening to Radio Free Mike. Welcome to Radio Free Mike, the podcast about freedom and its discontents. My name is Michael Scott Moore, and today we're talking to Mo Ogrodnik, author of a new novel called Gulf. Mo is a documentary and feature filmmaker who teaches at NYU, and her first novel is a stark story of 5 women whose lives intertwine in the Middle East, mostly in the neighborhood of the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, near the Persian or the Arabian Gulf. We talk about human trafficking, some differences between writing and filmmaking, and a great deal about craft, especially the difficulties of plotting a multi-voice novel. Mo, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Michael.
Your book Gulf is right down my alley. It has all the topics that I like to think and write about, and it's extremely well written. So I really wanted to have you on and talk about not just the topics, but also the act of writing it. It's called Gulf, and it's set mostly in the Middle East, centered around Saudi Arabia and Abu Dhabi, so near the Persian Gulf, but the title also refers to some distance between the characters. It follows 5 women with very different backgrounds. Can you tell me a little about the story and how it came about?
Well, I was living and working in Abu Dhabi on the NYU Abu Dhabi campus.
Mm-hmm.
I was the Dean of the Arts, where I was helping to create all the arts programs there. And I also had a creative lab that I was the PI on that was really looking at the transnational heritage of the UAE.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of heritage is a very big deal over there in material culture. And a lot of that is tied to this idea of kind of national narratives and who gets to tell those stories. I mean, we're thinking about that a lot in our country right now.
Yeah.
So it's a very contested space, but I was very interested in finding out more and capturing the narratives of many of the laborers who have helped really build that country. So a lot of the South Asian population, and different people from different parts of the world who have really participated in the building of, bridges, buildings, roads, hospitals, etc. So that's what I was working on and doing with artists and scholars.
Right. So you were helping to set up, was it a school of the arts or just the whole concept of the university?
All the arts programs within NYU Abu Dhabi, which is our kind of international college. It's a full liberal arts college. And then I also had this creative lab as a researcher that was really working on ideas of heritage and storytelling.
Right. Yeah. And the book follows not just a New Yorker named Justine who comes to Abu Dhabi to help with a museum project, but also a woman from Saudi Arabia who becomes a mother and realizes she doesn't want to be a mother, among other things that she realizes. And it's a fugue of voices and stories. So could you just give us a summary of what happens?
It's 5 women who are living and working in the Arabian Gulf region. So it's an American woman who's working on a falcon exhibit in the museums in Abu Dhabi. It's an Ethiopian girl who's illegally trafficked up through Yemen from Ethiopia and lands in Abu Dhabi. It's a Saudi woman. It's a Filipino woman who goes from the Philippines to Saudi. And then it's a Syrian woman who finds herself married by her parents to a jihadi ISIS fighter and who decides to join the female morality police.
Right. Yeah. She becomes an ISIS bride and then also a policewoman in Raqqa in Syria. And that makes her extremely unpopular. Let's start with Dunya, who's the Saudi woman. She's very well off, but she feels trapped in her marriage. And she's not as kind to Flora, the Filipino woman who comes to work for her, as you might expect.
Yeah. So I guess the origin story for the book really came from my friend Yasmin Hassan, who at the time was running a global women's organization called Equality Now, which
Mm-hmm.
fights for the global rights of women through the law. And she called me when I was living in Abu Dhabi because there were 5 women who had collectively murdered their trafficker,
Oh,
and
wow.
she was looking for legal representation for those women. And so I helped her do that. And through that case, I became more aware of kind of this female on female violence that was happening in domestic spaces.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, it really was just around domestic workers and their employers. And then it became into this kind of larger network of thinking about this idea of female violence and how female violence between women really kind of speaks to these larger systems
Mm-hmm.
of migration and power. And that really became kind of the siren for the book of just like, how does this work? How can I explore that more psychologically?
Right, and like I said, Dunya takes on a Filipino worker, and it goes bad almost from the beginning, partly because of her emotional state. But was that based on stories that you heard?
Yeah. So I went to the Philippines and I spent time in a domestic worker training center with
Uh-huh.
40 women who were being deployed to Saudi Arabia.
Mm-hmm.
And, as part of that training, the teachers talk about different kinds of abuse that may
Oh, right.
happen. And they talk about how their phones may get taken away, their passports, how to deal with abuse in some ways, psychological abuse, physical abuse. And there are parts even of the book that actually are taken from the domestic worker training handbook,
Mm-hmm.
right? That whole list of like, do not do this, do not do that.
Right.
That is from that training handbook.
Yeah.
But the thing is that I think it's really important, at least it was really important for me in thinking about this relationship between abused and abuser that is a dynamic that is repeated over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
That to me, it was a pathology. And I was very interested in exploring the pathology and just how does a woman who has never even contemplated violence towards another woman or abuse or torture, how are those women repeatedly finding themselves in that kind of relationship with their
Right.
domestic worker? And
Right.
so I wanted to really come to it from a place of curiosity
Mm-hmm.
and just trying to really understand Dunya's psychological and emotional landscape.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she gets very first of all, she lies about the gender of the child, and
Mhm.
then that gets her into trouble because the child turns out not to be a son,
Yes.
and in the sort of her traditional family or her husband's traditional family, that's a problem, and she gets very depressed. I mean, but it's not just postpartum depression, but it's just she just doesn't want to be a mother to this child, and she hands her daughter off to Flora.
I think also that what I was interested in there is that, Dunya herself is quite young. She's in her early 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she really feels at the beginning of this book that she has so much possibility ahead of her, that her husband's father is this very powerful man who really has taken a shine to her and sees her intelligence and her capability.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the reasons why she marries Hamid, is because she feels like, I'm really going to get this ability to self actualize.
Right.
And then he dies, and suddenly she suddenly finds herself in a very traditional situation and being pregnant. And I think it's more this sense of mourning of her own life that the birth signifies,
Mm-hmm.
right? That at first there was all this hope and possibility around the pregnancy, and then she starts to realize, like, like actually all of this hope and possibility is now going to pass to my child, and my life is kind of going to be subordinate to that person.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in some ways, she's very much in rebelling against that.
Right. Right. And I mean, those feelings are normal.
Yeah.
But with Dunya, she just goes to a very dark place, and
Hmm.
it's unrelenting, which I liked first of all in the book. And Flora is a very sweet Filipina, and she puts up with a lot. Um, but it. I mean, I can tell that that you've talked to women who've done that.
Well,
Um,
she's quite tough too, I mean, I
mhm,
think that's the thing I really wanted to make sure that no one was just purely a victim in this book.
No.
Everyone is guilty of transgressions.
Hmm.
And I think that there's something, a kind of agency when Flora has lost so much freedom. There is a kind of agency and power she gains by having this very close relationship with Dunya's child,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Right.
And that creates a lot of complications between them.
Yeah. Yeah, right, exactly. Now, Eskandari, an Ethiopian woman, or actually she's quite young.
Yeah, she's
We
15.
she starts in Ethiopia, and she doesn't come to the region until late in the book, or at least is she based on somebody people you met?
Yeah, so I went to Ethiopia and I worked with the International Labor Organization.
Hmm.
They helped me locate Gulf return girls, so girls who had returned to Addis, who did not feel comfortable or who felt too ashamed to go back to their villages.
Hmm.
I mean, it's really sad. And I interviewed um, a bunch of those young girls basically in this high school gym locker room behind the
Hmm.
bus station, um, about their experiences, which were very different than the Filipino domestic workers, right?
Right.
Because the domestic workers were like part of a training, a whole training system. They're very much supported by the government. They were often their sponsors in the host country were paying for them to go through this training system. Whereas the Ethiopian girls, often they're going against their will. Sometimes it will be a father or an uncle who kind of gets them connected to some kind of trafficker, who then they follow up through this path through Yemen into Saudi Arabia. So
Right.
they
And
really
it
have no protections.
Right, and it's different work. It's menial work, and I mean, it seems to be barely contracted. I mean, it's very it's even more exploitative.
Yes, it's really horrible.
Yeah. Um, and Zainab, who's the ISIS bride, she stays in Raqqa for most of the book. She leaves
Yeah.
towards the end, but she stays there. And what's remarkable is that her parents put her up to marrying this ISIS terrorist,
Well,
who
for her protection and for the protection of the family. That's their rationale.
right, because the situation in Raqqa has just changed. So the quasi state of ISIS has been recently established, and everyone in Raqqa has to deal with it. I mean, they have to either leave or find their way
Mhm.
into living with
Yeah.
the men who are basically in charge. And so her parents put her up to marrying him, but then they change once she joins the police force. They don't like that very much.
I mean, she in some ways was one of the most interesting characters to write.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but this has been a free preview of this episode. And the whole thing is open to paid subscribers to Radio Free Mike. So if you'd like to hear the rest, please hit the link in your show notes or in the body of the email we've sent you and upgrade your subscription over at Substack. Then you'll be able to listen to the full episode on any platform. Thanks for listening.